Focus is not something that just happens to you. It's not a mysterious state that arrives when the conditions feel perfect or when you're simply in the mood to work. Focus is an active neurobiological process governed by very specific brain circuits and chemicals that you can learn to control. It's not passive, and it's not just about trying harder. It's about engaging the right systems in the brain deliberately, consistently, and at the right time. At the core of focus are three key neuromodulators: dopamine, norepinephrine, and acetylcholine. These chemicals are released by distinct brain structures, and each one plays a unique role. Dopamine provides motivation and drive. It's the molecule of pursuit. Norepinephrine increases alertness and readiness. Acetylcholine helps direct your attention like a spotlight on the most relevant information. When these three systems are online and aligned, you feel locked in. Your brain isn't just awake, it's selectively awake, tuned into one thing and filtering out the rest. What's critical to understand is that the release of these chemicals can be driven by your behavior. For instance, when you eliminate distractions and sit down to work on one meaningful task, you're not just organizing your schedule, you're signaling to your brain, this matters. That signal increases the release of dopamine in areas like the prefrontal cortex and striatum, enhancing motivation and reinforcing attention. Now consider what happens when you scroll through social media or bounce between emails and text messages. You may feel mentally busy, but you're not truly focused. Your brain is entering a fragmented state. Dopamine spikes are short and chaotic. Acetylcholine isn't directed, it's scattered. You're engaging systems that promote novelty seeking, not deep concentration. The neurobiology in that moment is actually training your brain to be distracted. The good news is that focus, like strength or endurance, can be trained. And it starts by treating focus like a skill, not a feeling. Set a timer, remove all digital distractions, and commit to a single task for a defined period. You'll notice resistance at first. That's your brain craving the cheap dopamine of switching tasks. But push through that barrier and something interesting happens. Your neuromodulators begin to synchronize. The brain releases just the right amount of acetylcholine to narrow your attention, norepinephrine to increase alertness, and dopamine to reinforce effort. You enter a state of deep focus because you created the conditions for it. This is what it means to treat focus as an active state. It's not something you wait for. It's something you build. Every focused session teaches your brain to sustain effort and ignore distractions. And every time you give in to distraction, you wire the brain to crave it more. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to change, is always at work. The question is, are you training it toward focus or away from it? So focus is not a switch you flip. It's a system you engage, a state you cultivate, and ultimately a skill you own. If you want to master focus, you have to first understand that your brain doesn't operate in a vacuum. It runs on biological rhythms, patterns of alertness, energy, and cognition that repeat every 24 hours and every 90 minutes. These are called circadian and ultradian rhythms, and they're not abstract ideas. They're hardwired into your biology. They determine not just when you're awake or tired, but when your brain is most capable of deep, sustained focus. If you align your work with these rhythms, you can access peak mental performance. If you ignore them, you're fighting your own physiology. The circadian rhythm is your 24-hour internal clock, anchored primarily by light. Your retina, yes, your eyes, contains specialized cells that detect morning sunlight and send a signal to a brain structure called the suprachiasmatic nucleus. This structure regulates the release of cortisol, a hormone that promotes alertness and readiness. If you get sunlight exposure early in the day, you set that clock correctly. That means cortisol rises when it should early and tapers off gradually toward evening. This creates a reliable window of alertness, usually 30 to 120 minutes after waking, when your brain is primed for focus. Miss that light exposure and your clock drifts. Cortisol spikes later, your energy is inconsistent, and focus becomes harder to control. Now, within that 24-hour cycle, you also experience shorter 90-minute waves of heightened attention. These are called ultradian rhythms. They're driven by cycles of brain and body activity that affect everything from your heart rate to your capacity to concentrate. During each 90-minute cycle, there's a natural rise in alertness, then a dip. When you're in that peak, focus feels effortless. You can concentrate deeply, retain information, and stay on task. But when that wave dips, typically around the 75 to 90-minute mark, your brain needs a break. Push through without recovery, and you hit cognitive fatigue. Dopamine and norepinephrine levels fall. Acetylcholine becomes less efficient, and your mental sharpness drops off fast. The key here is timing your focus blocks to ride those ultradian peaks. For most people, 2 to 3 of these 90-minute cycles can be harnessed each day for deep work. Ideally during the first 8 hours after waking. That's when your circadian rhythm overlaps with the most consistent ultradian peaks. After that, energy tends to shift, and your capacity for creative or strategic thought might change. Not disappear, but change. It's not about working less. It's about working in sync with your biology. This also means breaks aren't optional. They're necessary. Between focus blocks, step away. Take 10 to 15 minutes with no stimulation, no phone, no notifications, just movement or stillness. That break allows neuromodulators to reset, and it prepares the brain for another cycle of high performance. If you understand and respect these rhythms, you stop guessing when to do your best work. You stop forcing focus when your biology is pushing back. Instead, you ride the waves your brain is already generating. And that's when focus becomes something sustainable, reliable, and trainable. If you're serious about training your brain to stay focused, the first thing you need to lock in is your light exposure, specifically sunlight. Early in the day, this isn't motivational fluff, it's neuroscience. Early sunlight exposure sets the master clock in your brain, and that clock regulates everything from your alertness to your mood, your energy, your metabolism, and yes, your capacity to focus. Here's how it works. Inside your eyes right now are specialized cells called intrinsically photosensitive retinal ganglion cells. These aren't involved in seeing images. They're wired directly to a brain region called the suprachiasmatic nucleus, the control center for your circadian rhythm. When you step outside in the morning and get bright sunlight into your eyes, those cells fire, sending a loud and clear signal the day has started. That signal triggers the timed release of several key neurochemicals. First, cortisol spikes. Not the stress response kind we associate with burnout, but the healthy, natural morning rise in cortisol that enhances alertness, focus, and readiness. This rise acts like a starter pistol for your brain and body. It tells every cell, every system, it's time to be awake, it's time to move, it's time to engage. Now, timing matters. You want that cortisol pulse to happen early, ideally within 30 to 60 minutes after waking. If you delay light exposure, or worse, stay indoors under artificial lighting, you delay the cortisol peak. And when cortisol rises late, you feel foggy in the morning, wired in the evening, and your sleep suffers at night. That's not just about sleep quality. That's about your ability to focus during the day. Because without that morning anchor, your entire 24-hour neurochemical rhythm becomes unpredictable. And you cannot train focus on a chaotic foundation. There's another piece to this. Sunlight also cues the rise in dopamine. Dopamine is the molecule of motivation and pursuit. It sharpens your attention, energizes your effort, and sustains goal-directed behavior. When you get sunlight early in the day, you get a healthy, natural increase in dopamine tone. This creates a neurochemical environment primed for deep focus. Skip that, and you're more likely to chase novelty and distraction because your brain will seek dopamine elsewhere, often from your phone, sugar, or random stimulation. You don't need to stare at the sun, and you don't need perfect conditions. Just get outside. 5 to 10 minutes on a clear day, 15 to 30 minutes if it's cloudy. No windows, no sunglasses. Those block the exact wavelengths your brain needs to register light intensity. Do it consistently, and over time, you create a stable neural rhythm that tells your brain exactly when to be alert and when to wind down. So before you drink your coffee, before you check your phone, before you dive into the day, get sunlight in your eyes. It's the most powerful, most accessible tool to anchor your alertness and create a foundation for sustained, high-quality focus. Every day you get it right, you're training your brain to wake up, lock in, and stay sharp. One of the most overlooked truths about mental performance is this: your brain is not designed for endless concentration. Focus isn't infinite, it operates in natural cycles. Peaks and dips in cognitive capacity that repeat about every 90 minutes. These are called ultradian cycles, and they shape how long you can deeply focus before your system starts to push back. If you understand and respect these cycles, you can extract the highest quality work from your brain without burning it out. If you ignore them, you're fighting biology, and biology always wins. Here's what happens inside your brain. When you begin a focused task, writing, coding, problem solving, you kick off a neurochemical cascade. Dopamine rises to drive motivation. Norepinephrine sharpens alertness. Acetylcholine zeroes in your attention. But these resources are finite. You can't sustain that state indefinitely. Somewhere around the 75 to 90 minute mark, your brain begins to shift. Neural resources start to deplete. Glucose drops, microfatigue sets in. If you push beyond this point without pause, the quality of your thinking starts to erode, often without you noticing. You're working harder, but with less clarity and more mistakes. This is why deep focus works best when structured in 90-minute blocks, followed by deliberate recovery. Think of these blocks like mental sprints, not marathons. During that window, eliminate distractions, silence your phone, and commit to one cognitively demanding task. Set a timer if you need to, but be ruthless about your boundaries. No multitasking, no jumping between tabs. The goal is to build what's called selective attention, the ability to hold one thing in mind while suppressing everything else. That's where neuroplasticity occurs. That's when you're training your brain to focus better. But the recovery period is just as important. After each 90-minute block, take a real break, 10 to 15 minutes. Step away from screens. Move your body. Let your eyes shift focus to the distance. This gives the brain space to reset its neurochemical balance. It allows dopamine and acetylcholine to replenish. It lets your nervous system return to baseline. These breaks aren't laziness, they're essential. They protect the quality of your next block of focus. Without them, each cycle becomes less efficient, more stressful, and less productive. Think of your focus capacity like a battery. You can drain it fast by grinding through 5 hours straight, or you can recharge it periodically and maintain high voltage throughout the day, 2 to 3 deep work blocks each 90 minutes, separated by recovery, can produce more high-quality output than an entire day of distracted, unstructured effort. Your nervous system evolved to work in cycles. When you align your schedule with these rhythms, you unlock a kind of cognitive power that feels sustainable, repeatable, and even enjoyable. Focus stops being a grind and becomes a rhythm, one your brain was built for. Focus isn't just about willpower, it's about physiology. And when your attention starts to drift, the fastest way to pull it back isn't always by thinking harder, it's by using your body to shift your brain, specifically through two highly effective tools, visual anchoring and breathwork. These aren't abstract techniques, they're direct access points into your nervous system. They allow you to take control of your internal state in real time, bringing your attention back online when it starts to slip. Let's start with visual anchoring. Your eyes aren't just for seeing the world. They're an extension of your brain. In fact, the retina is part of your central nervous system, and how you use your eyes directly influences your level of mental focus. When you fix your gaze on a single point, what's called convergent visual focus, you engage the same neural pathways involved in narrowing cognitive attention. The circuits responsible for focusing your eyes and focusing your mind overlap in key brain areas like the prefrontal cortex and the superior colliculus. This means that when your mind starts to wander and you feel that slippery loss of concentration, you can manually re-engage your focus systems by locking your eyes on one specific, unmoving point. It could be a corner of your screen, a dot on the wall, or even the edge of your notebook. The act of stilling your gaze tells your brain, this is important. Stay here. It narrows your visual window, and in doing so, it narrows your cognitive bandwidth, cutting out noise, reducing distraction. Now pair that with breath work, and you have a powerful 1-2 punch. Your breath is the only part of your autonomic nervous system you can control consciously. That gives you leverage. Shallow, fast breathing increases sympathetic tone. It ramps up stress, but controlled breathing, especially through the nose, can shift you into a calm yet alert state, ideal for focus. One of the most effective protocols is simple. A deep nasal inhale. The longer exhale activates the parasympathetic system, reducing anxiety and mental chatter. But the deep inhale maintains alertness. Together, this pattern balances your system. Calm but engaged. There's also a quick reset you can use when attention crashes, the physiological sigh. That's 2 quick inhales through the nose, one slightly deeper than the other, followed by a long exhale through the mouth. It's a natural reflex you actually do when crying or yawning, but when used deliberately, it rapidly reduces levels of carbon dioxide in the blood and activates brain areas linked to clarity and control. In under 10 seconds, you can shift from scattered to centered. The brain is dynamic. Attention will always fluctuate, but instead of blaming yourself or trying to force it with more effort, use these tools. Anchor your eyes. Control your breath. These aren't tricks, they're levers built into your system, and when used with intent, they can snap your focus back into place almost instantly, giving you real-time command over your mental state. When it comes to improving focus, there's a lot of talk about supplements, what to take, how much, and when. And while certain nutrients and compounds can absolutely support brain function and enhance attention, it's critical to understand one thing. They are not the foundation. They are additions, not substitutes. No pill, powder, or stack will ever outperform what your brain naturally gets from sleep, light, and behavioral structure. You can't shortcut your biology. Focus relies on a finely tuned balance of neurochemicals. Dopamine, norepinephrine, acetylcholine, all of which are synthesized from raw materials your body gets through food and rest. Essential nutrients like omega-3 fatty acids, B vitamins, magnesium, choline, and amino acids play key roles in neurotransmitter production and signaling. For example, tyrosine is a precursor to dopamine. Choline supports acetylcholine production, and omega-3s, especially EPA and DHA, are crucial for maintaining the integrity of neural membranes, allowing signals to transmit efficiently. So yes, nutrition matters, and certain well-formulated supplements can help optimize these systems, especially if you're deficient or under chronic cognitive load. But here's the distinction. These compounds support focus. They don't create it. You can have a perfectly dialed in supplement routine, but if you're sleeping 5 hours a night, avoiding morning sunlight, and working without structure or rhythm, your focus will be unstable. Why? Because the brain's ability to sustain attention depends on systemic signals, not just local chemical boosts. Take sleep, for example. Sleep is when your brain resets its capacity for attention. During deep sleep and REM, neural circuits involved in learning and memory undergo reorganization. Waste byproducts are cleared out. Dopamine receptors are resensitized. You're not just recovering energy, you're rebuilding your ability to focus the next day. No amount of caffeine or nootropic is going to override a sleep-deprived brain for long. The cost always catches up. Then there's light. Early sunlight exposure anchors your circadian rhythm, which governs when your brain produces cortisol, dopamine, and melatonin. That rhythm determines your alertness window. If it's off, if you miss morning light or stare at screens late into the night, your focus becomes scattered no matter what you take. And finally, structure. Your brain craves patterns. It performs best when it knows what to expect. That means working in 90-minute blocks, taking deliberate breaks, and avoiding constant task switching. Structure creates predictability, and the brain responds to predictability with stability in neurotransmitter flow. So yes, supplements can help. Caffeine can boost alertness. L-theanine can smooth that edge. Rhodiola, creatine, alpha-GPC each has its place, especially under high cognitive demand. But they are amplifiers, not foundations. Think of them like a sound system. If the room is built wrong, poor acoustics, no insulation. It doesn't matter how expensive your speakers are, the structure determines the quality of the signal. The real performance enhancers are sleep, light, and behavioral rhythm. Get those right first. Then and only then consider targeted supplementation to fine-tune what's already working. If there's one silent killer of deep focus in the modern world, it's context switching. Every time you shift your attention from a document to a message, from a task to a notification, you pay a neurological price. Focus is not just about what you're doing, it's about what you're not doing. The brain can't multitask when it comes to complex cognitive work. It task switches, and that switch is costly, not just in time, but in the depletion of the very neurochemicals that allow you to concentrate in the first place. Here's what's happening under the hood. When you're locked in on a task, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive control, is engaged. It's filtering out distractions, holding relevant information in working memory, and suppressing irrelevant impulses. This process requires a tight flow of dopamine and norepinephrine, which helps stabilize attention and increase signal-to-noise ratio in neural circuits. But the moment you switch tasks, say glance at a text or check your email, you disrupt that neurochemical balance. Each switch forces your brain to reorient itself. That means new decision-making, new filtering, new energy expenditure, and the return cost, the time it takes to get back into the original task, can be upwards of 20 minutes. Multiply that across a day, and you're burning hours in invisible cognitive friction. Worse, you're training your brain to be distractible. Every time you reward yourself with a dopamine hit from checking something quick and easy, you reinforce the circuitry that pulls you away from depth. You're teaching your nervous system to prefer novelty over effort. So how do you protect focus? You design for it. You build an environment that reduces the likelihood of context switching in the first place. Start with your phone. It should not be within arm's reach during deep work. Better yet, put it in another room. Turn off notifications, all of them, not just do not disturb, but app badges, banners, previews, everything. Every red dot or buzz is a micro signal whether you respond or not. Your browser matters too. Use separate desktops or virtual spaces for deep work and shallow tasks. No tabs open that don't relate to the current task. And if your work requires research, batch it. Don't flip back and forth between writing and Googling. Each switch drains focus. You can also prime your brain by making the task visible. Use physical cues. A single open notebook, one Post-it, a cleared desk. The less ambiguity in your environment, the less your brain has to negotiate what to focus on. Give it a single, obvious target. Finally, use sound to your advantage. Background music without lyrics or low-frequency hums like brown noise or binaural beats can create an auditory cocoon that helps drown out distractions and keeps the brain in a consistent state of engagement. If you want to train sustained attention, stop relying on willpower alone. Build an environment that defaults to depth. Make distraction harder and focus becomes easier. Not because your brain changed overnight, but because you stopped giving it reasons to leave the task in front of you. The ability to focus is not a gift. It's a trainable skill, built on a foundation of biology, behavior, and consistency. When you align your daily actions with how your brain and body are designed to function by honoring sleep, light, rhythm, and structure, you create the conditions for sustained attention. You learn to direct your mind with precision rather than force. Supplements can support, but they cannot replace the fundamentals. Tools like visual anchoring, breathwork, and environment design are not hacks. They are science-based methods for reclaiming control in a world built for distraction. And once you begin to apply these principles, focus stops feeling like a battle and starts becoming a state you can access on demand. Train it like any other system, and over time, your capacity for deep work will no longer be the exception, it will be the norm.